Chapter 5 Endless Divergence. No, I'm telling you, he's dangerous business. We don't take in strangers, in case you've forgotten, Humphrey. I awoke to the voice of a woman yelling out her thoughts on a subject I soon understood was me. You should not be so condescending, Wanda, exclaimed a deep voice belonging to a seemingly prudent man with an English accent. This man needed our help. We could not just abandon him, now could we? No, of course not, Grand Magister, the woman answered stutteringly. Her intonation was humble in the face of the man with the deep voice. See, that's just what I told Ricardo and he believed me, and the Grand Magister believes me too. You're in the wrong, Wanda. The man whom I deduced was Humphrey laughed depreciatively. I somehow forced my eyes open, although still being under heavy influence by the unnatural sleep. Humphrey soon exclaimed, Look! He's awake! Why, yes he is. This is fortunate indeed, the man with the deep voice proclaimed. As I opened my eyes fully, I was suddenly blinded by the sharp rays of the sun shining brightly in the distant sky beyond the window. My vision was somewhat blurry, but I noted that I was lying in a soft bed in a small bedroom of sorts, quite old-fashioned by the looks of it. Oh, I muttered silently. Can you sit up? The man with the deep voice asked cordially. I tried to move my limbs and managed to give him my hand with some effort. He pulled me up to sitting position and snapped his fingers in front of me. Are you with us? Yes, I am, was my short answer. My throat was dry and my mind still numb from the battle with the creature in the cave lake. A smell of fragrant flowers permeated the room and filled me with a sense of calmness. Humphrey, tell Lady Talise to prepare some food and beverage downstairs, the man with the deep voice ordered, and looked over his shoulder. Humphrey swiftly ran out of the room with heavy steps, and I could hear him make his way down a set of stairs. As I regained more and more of my vision, the reality in which I was in grew gradually more tangible. When the deep-voiced man turned his head towards me again, I was shocked to see that he had some sort of mask on. What the hell was going on here? The mask covered his entire face, and only his eyes were somewhat discernible through the visor sockets. The face mask was made of tempered steel and resembled the stone countenance you often see on angel statues. So, you are finally awake? Never seen someone out so cold, I believe, he said with a slightly muffled voice, and stood up fully, still holding onto my shoulder. Can you stand? I think so, I answered, and widened the distance between my feet, mustering all of my strength into my leg muscles. A few seconds later, I was standing face to face with the masked man in front of me. As I looked at my arms, torso and legs, I noticed that my clothes were clean and tidy, and gave off a fresh smell. My first thought was that these people must have washed them during my forced repose. You may call me Thelius, conscript. Now let us go downstairs, he said, and observed me through the slits in his angel mask. Wanda, come here and hold his hand. Into my line of vision came a woman in her mid-20s and grabbed my hand. Her countenance was also masked, but the plastic facade covering her face resembled the kind often used during masquerades, reminiscent of Venetian carnivals. I felt serene warmth spreading throughout my body as she burrowed her slender hand into mine. We started on our way towards the room's exit. The house was old, and its deep blue tapestry was adorned with odd symbolic motifs. The penchant for outdated design became even more apparent as I beheld the furniture around me. The feet of the wooden benches and desks were made out of gnarled wood, and the canvases on the walls all held oil paintings with natural themes. The images therein were beautiful, and I thought that if I wasn't stuck here with these strange people, I could have enjoyed such scenery firsthand with my family. I bet they're worried sick about me by now. The house's interior exuded an old-fashioned atmosphere that was charming but at the same time quite disturbing, considering its outlandish denizens. I was almost able to walk on my own when we came down to the first floor. With a simple nod, I gestured to the man with the deep voice and the woman known as Wanda to let go of me. They both abided, and I now stood on my own. I noticed that we had stopped in a hall, probably one of the largest rooms in the house. From out of the kitchen came another woman in her 30s with a plate adorned with fake plastic pearls. On top of the plate were 2 sandwiches, a glass of water, and a pitcher. This woman was the first I had seen since my awakening who didn't wear a mask. She was quite beautiful, but something about her face disturbed me greatly. It was almost as if the face was some kind of illusion, hiding her real visage. She handed the plate over to the woman named Wanda, and detachedly went into the kitchen again. "Thank you," I said, trying my best to sound genuine. Without hesitation, I clutched the glass of water and drank heftily. As the liquid flowed down my throat, I regained yet more of my strength. I then grabbed a cheese sandwich and bit down firmly on its crunchy texture. Its fine-crusted dough melted in my mouth, and I almost succumbed to the pleasure of finally eating something. As I swallowed, I was made aware that I probably hadn't eaten in quite a while. My stomach growled and furled as I consumed the rest of the sandwich. "It seems that our guest is hungry," the deep-voiced man stated, and disappeared into the kitchen. Wanda and I were the only ones left in the hall upon his departure. I looked at her with a sincere expression, but she quickly turned her head away from me. "Heathen!" she whispered quietly. "What's that?" I replied, although I had clearly heard her the first time. Now, Wanda, do not bother our guest with your antics," Thelius stated, as he once more came into the hall. "Let us go into the dining hall. We can continue our conversation there." "No," I said promptly, copping out on the alluring sense of false safety conveyed by this bizarre collective. "Excuse me?" Thelius asked as the mentally challenged male known as Humphrey joined us in the hall. "I told you this was a bad idea," Wanda cried and looked at me with disgust in her eyes. "I'm sorry, but I can't stay here any longer," I explained. "Oh, but it is far too late to return, my good man. You are here now, and that is the only thing that matters," the deep-voiced man said reassuringly. "You'll soon be one of us. Leaving would only be a waste of time," Humphrey explained and looked at me with an askew gaze. "Leave me alone. I need to find my family," I stated and clearly marked my intentions. "Do you now?" Thelius asked intriguingly. "Well then, by all means, you are free to leave. We will not stop you, will we, Wanda?" "Damn right!" she swore and fake spat at me. "You dare swear in this house, girl?" Thelius cried and slapped Wanda across the face. The mask almost fell off as she cringed to the floor, following the blow from the man's open palm. The woman swiftly corrected her face mask and stood up once more. I took a few steps backwards, frightened by the whole situation. When I looked over at the woman, I noticed tears rolling down her cheek. She remained still for a few seconds, but then suddenly went into a fit of rage. "Shut up! You're not the boss of me! I hate you!" she yelled at the man with the angel mask and ran past me. With a hard push, she tore open the door leading outside and ran down the street while crying immensely. I felt sorry for the woman, but didn't intend to stay long enough to suffer her fate. Moments afterwards, a series of flashes flew by my inner eye, whereupon an aching pain grabbed hold of my head and left just moments later. I got my act together as fast as I could and took hold of my wobbling head to get my bearings straight. "Are you well enough to leave?" the deep-voiced Thelius inquired and crossed his arms in a decisive manner. None of your damn business," I coughed forth and turned away with steadfast steps, then went over to the open doorway. "Hey, stranger," Thelius stated, whereupon I turned around and faced him. "Do not forget these, although I do not know what good they will do you, since you are already here." He threw my gun and my flashlight to me, and I caught them both with nimble moves. "Thanks," I replied briefly and put them into my belt before heading out. I drew a sigh of relief after closing the door and walking down the stairs. I then made off towards the sunny summer street on the other side of the white picket fence, dividing the garden and the road. The horrible and confusing events I had experienced up until now seemed to have been drawn out from some nightmare. How did I end up here, and what happened after I defeated the fish-like monster in the cavern? Why did the police come to the hostel area? Was my family all right? and how could I make my way back to them? I looked back at the house in which I had awoken. The house was white in color, and its classical row house design was reminiscent of a typical American rural community. The residence also boasted a wide front porch, newly refurbished by the looks of it. A garage had been built on the right-hand side, and a few trees with wide crowns decorated the front yard. A swing constellation had also been erected below the tree, and its two swings gently blew to and fro in the mild breeze. As I threw a quick glance at the houses around the street, I came to the conclusion that I was standing in the middle of an ordinary residential area, most likely in the town of Cordale. The other buildings were similar to the one I had just come from. Judging by the complete standardization of the area, it seemed as if everyone living here were content with leading sculpted lives in fixed hegemony. I was exactly the same though, but this part of town really lived up to the stereotype. I consulted my wristwatch to see what time it was, but I was hopelessly disappointed when I saw the watch's shattered glass and immobile dials. It was probably a result of the cave battle. The only still functioning feature was the compass, which told me I was currently facing south. Where the hell am I? How do I get back to my family? Those were the thoughts swirling around in my head at that moment. The sun stood high in the sky, and by using the skills developed during my time in the military, I deduced that it was around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. The sun baked the asphalt road, and I became painfully aware that a headache was coming on. The humid air and sun-drenched road emitted heat waves, and the atmosphere grew more and more unbearable by the minute. I had to get away from here. The houses around the street all seemed abandoned, as did the cabins by the hostel. I didn't know what to believe, but decided that now wasn't the time to dwell on it. Without further ado, I made my way down the afternoon street towards a rotary circle some ways ahead. As I came closer, I noticed a street sign on the side of the road indicating that I was walking on Cardbury Street, coming up to the traffic circle called Fallows Cross. The eastern road was called Rabbit Street, and the western one was known as Serenity Road. Unsure where to go from here, lost in the town of Cordale, I scoured the surrounding area for any signs of life. Even though I walked around in the middle of the day, there weren't any cars, animals, or people milling about. The silence was deafening, and even the wind had abated. I continued on my way forward, hoping to find some landmark that would help me pinpoint my location, or maybe find some way to contact Lorraine and the kids. From out of nowhere, an ominous black cloud flew by and covered the overhead sun. A temporary shade fell over the area, and a chill slowly crept up my spine. Two shadows of an innocent teenage girl and boy suddenly formed in the shadowed area, and I attentively followed their path. The girl skipped around with a school bag over her shoulder and a flower in her hand while smiling intently at the young boy. The boy answered with a smile of his own, and they seemed happy, content in their innocent world. As they came closer to my position, a new shadow inexplicably emerged from beside me, heading towards the young couple with resolute steps. The shadow was that of a male, given his style of walking. He harshly marched up to them and grabbed the teenage girl by the hand, making her drop the flower. The frightening silhouette then broadened his stance and crushed the flower beneath his heels. The girl started to bawl and reached for the flower with her tender hands, but the larger shadow drew her upright and eyed the boy angrily. He then delivered a swift open hand towards the boy's face, slapping him senseless. After turning around in the opposite direction, the larger shadow carried the girl away from her teenage love. Their shadow faces were blurred out as they came towards me. A harsh breeze from nowhere suddenly blew at me, and before I knew it, the ominous black cloud had passed on, once again giving way to the warm sunlight. Before I even had the time to reflect upon the event that had just transpired, I suddenly heard the roaring sounds of a revved-up car engine coming closer with each passing second. I heightened my senses and went for cover beside a fire hydrant. I looked around, trying to pinpoint the direction from where the sounds came. Two cars, one chasing the other, suddenly came crashing down Rabbit Street to the east. The The first one drove competently around the traffic circle and exited towards the western Serenity Road on the other side. The driver of the second car, however, wasn't so lucky. He or she hit the brakes a moment too late and came crashing into a street lamp in the middle of the traffic circle. The lamp crumbled as the car smashed its foundation and immediately fell over the vehicle, shattering the front window. The male driver just barely escaped with his life by rolling out from the car just before the metal lamppost crushed the top of the vehicle. I was just about to run over to the injured man when a woman dressed in nurse's clothing strode towards him from across the street. Her hospital clogs clanked loudly as she made her way to the scene and declined beside the man. Even though still somewhat shocked, I made my way towards them as well. "Are you all right?" I heard her ask. The man coughed up some blood and answered, "No, not really." He then blacked out on the street. The nurse looked up with a panicked expression and saw me standing at a distance. She called out for me to help her get the wounded man into the hospital, located just northeast of Fallows Cross traffic circle. I swiftly made my way there without as much as a word and hoped that my effort wouldn't be in vain. With our powers combined, the nurse and I carried the man across the street and made our way up the approach leading into the hospital. A large sign stated that we were about to enter a place called Honeydale Hospital. After much ado, we managed to get the man inside and placed him on a gurney in the reception hall. The nurse thanked me with a quick nod and immediately ran down the hallway through 2 revolving doors into the corridor connecting the main building with the hospital's western wing. I saw her running towards an emergency room beyond the transparent glass in the doors. I drew a sigh of relief as the doors swung back and forth and their swishing sounds somehow calmed my mind. Before following the nurse and the wounded man, I made my way to the payphone booths to the right of the reception. Just as expected, though, they were all non-functional. Even though I felt somewhat safe upon entering the hospital, an unnerving sensation that things hadn't returned to normal soon trumped my mind. All the clocks in the reception hall had stopped at 17:38 sharp. Why was that, I wondered? What had happened to the thing I used to call reality? Another major fact that caught my attention inside the hospital was, just as with the rest of Cordale, that there wasn't a single soul present. No patients, no doctors, and no receptionists. The lone nurse, the wounded man, and I seemed to be the only citizens in the hospital. What was going on in this town?